Years ago, when most outlets were still running fairy tale headlines about her, the British biographer Tom Bower had already mapped the pattern people were about to live through. In his 2022 book Revenge, Meghan, Harry, and the War Between the Windsors, he wrote it plainly. She had not drifted into this position, she had built it. And he laid out the receipts. Fast forward to this week. A major royal channel ran the headline, "Meghan wanted sex with a rich man." They spent an hour saying nothing about it. The audience caught it before any pundit on the panel did. One of the most liked replies, with 328 likes, asked the question the panel refused to. So today, we are picking up the thread they cut. Every dot, Toronto, Soho House, the networking circuit, the meeting that wasn't an accident. Stay with us, because what credentialed biographers documented years ago is exactly the kind of record that matters now. Now, what changed this week isn't just a Kiev speech, or a Met Gala snub, or another headline her camp wishes had landed differently. It is the moment a years-old warning stopped being a theory. According to several recent reports, the detitling conversation around Harry has moved from background chatter to active institutional consideration. And the questions reportedly being asked behind closed doors aren't about last month. They are about the years before the wedding. Royal observers have been pointing to this exact pre-Harry pattern for the better part of a decade. The institutional memory around situations like this one tends to be far longer than most viewers assume. So we are going to walk you through every one of those decade-long signals, year by year, dot by dot, the way a documented chronology gets read. What if the people calling this out years ago weren't conspiracy theorists, but the only ones paying attention? Because the pattern wasn't hiding, it was being ignored. And there is a difference between a story nobody saw and a story everybody refused to look at. That difference is the entire reason this video exists. It started long before this week. It started before the wedding. It started before the engagement. It started in Toronto. Tom Bower is the British investigative biographer who has spent decades documenting public figures the British establishment would rather leave undocumented. He wrote on Maxwell. He wrote on Branson. He wrote on Conrad Black. And in 2022, he wrote Revenge, Meghan, Harry, and the War Between the Windsors, the unauthorized biography that traced her trajectory from Northwestern University to Toronto to a network most outlets weren't paying attention to at the time. The chapters that mattered today aren't about the wedding, they are about Toronto. According to Bower, this part of the story is where the architecture began. Bower made the argument plainly in that book. She wasn't drifting through these years. She was building a list. The Soho House membership wasn't a social perk. It was infrastructure. The networking circuit wasn't a career. It was preparation. The carefully cultivated profile wasn't vanity. It was strategy. None of it, according to his documentation, was incidental. So what kind of list takes the better part of a decade to build? The kind that wasn't ever meant for an actress on a cable show. And Bower wasn't alone. Angela Levin is the royal correspondent and biographer who actually sat with Harry at Kensington Palace before any of this started, the author of the 2018 book Harry, Conversations with the Prince. She knew him before the wedding. She watched the trajectory shift, and on multiple GB News appearances over the past 2 years, Levin has reportedly noted what most royal panels still won't put on television. He didn't understand what he was walking into. The people around him did. The people around her did. He was the only one in that room who didn't. That isn't a fringe observation. That is a credentialed biographer on a major news platform saying what Levin has been saying consistently for years. And the fact that it has stayed consistent across that long a stretch is part of what makes it significant. Not because consistency proves anything on its own, but because in a story, this loud, consistent observations from credentialed sources tend to get buried. Levin's hasn't been. Now take one specific window. Toronto, the early Suits years, roughly 2012 onward. Soho House Toronto on Adelaide Street West had just opened its doors. Allegedly, by the time her membership had settled in, the events she was attending outside of work were not the events you attend if your goal is acting. They were the events you attend if your goal is access. According to Bower's documentation, The pattern from this period is what makes the rest of the chronology readable. The dinners, the introductions, the gradual upgrading of the rooms she was being invited into, the careful pruning of the people she was being seen with. Every move, in retrospect, fits an arc. And the arc was not pointing at a starring role on USA Network. By 2012, in Toronto, at a Soho House location that has since become a kind of footnote in royal coverage, the resume she was building was not the resume of an actress. It was the resume of someone preparing for something the Toronto press hadn't caught on to yet. From that Toronto starting point, the pattern has held. Every year added another piece. Every piece pointed in the same direction. It's been said that the divorce came at exactly the right moment. The new relationship opened exactly the right doors. The timing of the move to London tracked exactly with the access she had quietly been arranging. What Bauer documented in that book, and what biographers like Levin have been saying on television for years, is that the early pattern was always going to catch up to her eventually. Not in a tabloid headline, not in a podcast clip, in the kind of conversation that actually changes a status. Because if the pattern was visible from the early Toronto years, what does it say that nobody on a televised royal panel this week was willing to name it? These are claims, not confirmed facts. We are laying out what has been published, what has been reported, and what credentialed biographers have argued in print. You decide what it means. But the pattern is on the record. The chronology is on the record. And the silence around the chronology, from the woman it concerns, has been on the record for almost as long as the chronology itself has. Now, year by year, here is how it played out. Toronto. The early Suits years. Soho House on Adelaide Street West had just opened its doors, and according to Bauer's documentation in that 2022 book, her membership there functioned less like a social perk and more like a working address. The membership wasn't recreation, it was infrastructure. Bauer made the argument plainly. The events she was attending, the introductions she was making, the way certain people she met at those events kept reappearing in later chapters of her trajectory. None of it, in his account, was random. So what kind of actress treats a private members club like a corporate office? The kind, allegedly, who wasn't really there for the acting. And the pattern from that early Toronto window is what makes the chronology that follows readable. Now, here is where the timeline gets specific. By September 2011, she had married the film producer Trevor Engelson. By August 2013, the marriage was over. The divorce papers were reportedly filed that summer in Los Angeles on grounds of irreconcilable differences, with the divorce itself finalized in 2014. According to multiple biographies of her published since, including Bauer's, the speed of the exit raised questions even at the time. 2 years in the door, out the door, and immediately, allegedly, into a different tier of social access in Toronto than she had been moving in the year before. That isn't a moral judgment, that is a timeline. And the timeline, on its own, has questions in it that no public statement from her camp has ever bothered to answer. Then came the Toronto restaurateur, the chef Corey Vitiello, whom she dated from roughly 2014 to 2016, ran the Harvard Room and Flock and was a recognizable figure in the Toronto hospitality scene. The Vitiello period sits in the chronology between the Trevor divorce and the introduction to Harry. Bauer's account in Revenge covers that window. The relationship itself isn't the story. The window it occupies in the timeline is 2 years. The 2 years immediately before the introduction. The 2 years that, in retrospect, ended up being the bridge. To be fair, plenty of people in their early 30s date upward after a divorce. Plenty change zip codes. Plenty take meetings at private clubs and call it networking. But when every one of those moves lands on the same trajectory, when that trajectory has been documented across multiple biographies, when the timing of each step lines up so cleanly that credentialed biographers have used words like calculation and ambition in print, that is no longer a coincidence anymore. That is a method, or it isn't. The chronology is what it is. You decide. And here is the prediction that has aged in interesting ways. Lady Colin Campbell, the royal author behind Meghan and Harry, The Real Story, published in 2020, has covered this story extensively on her YouTube channel over the past several years. The point she has reportedly come back to, in commentary across multiple videos, is one that many viewers didn't weight as heavily at the time as it lands now. The pattern in her observations was readable from the dates alone, and the wedding, in her account, wasn't the conclusion of the climb. It was a midpoint. The full chronology, by her account, kept moving after the ceremony was over. That observation didn't break through then. It is landing now, because the next phase is the one we are living through this week. This is one interpretation, not a confirmed outcome. We are laying out what biographers have argued in print and what credentialed royal commentators have argued on platform. We are not making accusations. We are tracking what has been said by people whose job it is to say it and noting which observations have stayed consistent across the years it took for the rest of the press to catch up. You weigh the credibility yourself. The receipts are public, the chronology is public, the silence around the chronology from the only person who could meaningfully address it is also public. And year by year, the rest of the timeline only gets louder. You don't accidentally meet a prince, not from Toronto, not on that timeline. Not after that decade of networking. The official story is the blind date in July 2016. The version that ran in every glossy headline at the time. The version that stayed unchallenged for years. But Bauer's account in Revenge raises questions about how unstaged the introduction actually was. The mutual friend, the setup, the convenient overlap of schedules. The story she told the public, in the early years after the wedding, kept shifting in small ways across interviews. The story Bauer documents lines up cleanly with the Toronto trajectory that came before it, and many people online have started asking the same question. What if every step before that dinner was preparation for that dinner? Voices in the British press have pointed out the same thing. The introduction, in their reading, fits the chronology far too neatly to be the coincidence the press at the time treated it as. Now, look at the timing after the introduction. November 2017, engagement. May 2018, wedding. May 2019, the Sussex Royal trademark filings begin. January 2020, the Megxit announcement. From the first dinner to the formal departure from royal duties is barely 4 years. From the wedding to the departure is barely 20 months. The compression matches the pre-Harry compression. Bauer has argued in Revenge that the trajectory after the wedding was never going to settle into a long royal career inside the institution. According to his account, the royal life functioned as a launchpad, not a finish line. The title, in his thesis, was always a means to something larger, which raises the question, once that kind of access stops returning value, what does the chronology say comes next? That isn't a hypothetical. That is the question every documented dot since 2020 has been answering, to be fair. Public figures lose deals, brand collaborations cool, streaming services renegotiate, media cycles turn. None of that, on its own, proves a single thing. But laid against the Toronto pattern, the shape isn't different. The Spotify deal ended in 2023. The Netflix deal, by reporting from 2023 and 2024, reportedly cooled from its initial framing. Archwell Foundation reportedly faced documented revenue declines in its own filings. The Australia tour landed flatter than the team marketed it as. According to one Australian viewer reaction with 114 likes, the headline retreat couldn't even sell 300 tickets. Allegedly, fewer than 200 people showed up. The Bondi Beach segments drew sharp criticism in the Australian press. And then came the cascade in fashion and Hollywood that this week made undeniable. According to multiple recent reports, the Met Gala on Monday in New York reportedly did not extend an invitation in her direction. Anna Wintour, the Vogue gatekeeper who personally controls that guest list, reportedly took her seat without her on it. The replacement reportedly seated where her presence was once expected was the Marchioness of Bath, Lady Emma Weymouth. The British aristocrat now occupying the visual real estate Meghan was reportedly hoping to occupy. That replacement, on its own, is one detail. Stacked against the rest of the chronology, it lands differently. Lauren Sanchez Bezos, the Met Gala co-sponsor whose husband Jeff Bezos owns the Washington Post, reportedly was once on cordial terms with her. Reportedly, that ended after Meghan was said to have called Sanchez trashy in private. And reportedly, the freeze that followed was no accident. Industry insiders reportedly believe the chill in that corner is now permanent. It does not stop with fashion. Boeing, by reporting that surfaced this week in viewer commentary, reportedly withdrew donations from the Invictus Games, the one project Harry has tried hardest to keep insulated from the Sussex brand collapse. If that report holds, the corporate sponsor Cascade has now reached the legacy work. The Cascade does not stop at glossy magazines, and on Saturday Night Live this past week, the comedian known as Scarjoy delivered a joke during the cold open. The setup involved King Charles arriving in America to negotiate the release of a British hostage. The punchline, by the joke's own framing, gestured toward Andrew. Pop culture mocking, in that moment, arrived at the family at exactly the level of the network primetime audience. Mark Dolan, the British host whose channel ran the headline this video opened on, put his summary of the marriage in his own line on air this week. According to Dolan, in his own framing, she has drained it out of him. The boy, in his words, is whipped. President Trump's reading of the situation by reporting from the Daily Mail royal biographer Robert Hardman landed in 3 words during his exchange with the King's Circle. "Oh boy, that wife of his," Trump went on, in his public framing, to make clear that Harry did not speak for the United Kingdom during the Kyiv appearance. According to recent reporting on his private comments through intermediaries, Trump now reportedly views the Sussex matter as a private family issue and is reportedly stepping back from public commentary on it. According to commentary across multiple platforms, the post-Sussex pattern looks structurally similar to the pre-Harry pattern. Same trajectory of access, same kind of incremental door closing once the access stops returning value. The difference between Toronto in 2012 and Montecito in 2026, by that reading, isn't direction. It is scale. And the direction, on every available data point, has been the same direction it was in Toronto. And that brings us to right now. 16 years of pattern, one direction, 0 deviations, and the public is finally catching up. If you have been on social media this week, the same comment is appearing under every royal video. They were right. They were always right. Scroll the replies under any major royal channel and the convergence is unmistakable. 4 kinds of comments are surfacing more than anything else. The first kind, viewers who spotted the Toronto trajectory years ago, before any biography landed, before any pundit named it, they are saying it now in 3 or 4 words. We told you. We have been saying this for years. The receipts have been here the whole time. The second kind, viewers asking the question the panel on Talk TV refused to ask this week. The yacht era question. The pre-Harry network question. The question the title of their video promised and the body of their video buried. Comments suggest the audience knows exactly which thread the panel cut, and they are not shy about naming it in the replies. One viewer with 328 likes put it bluntly. The comment asked Harry directly whether it bothered him that his uncle Andrew had been around her, in their reading, on the yachts. 9 question marks. The audience showed up for the title's promise. The panel didn't deliver, the comment did. It became one of the highest liked replies on the entire video. The third kind. Viewers rejecting the framing that the Sussexes ignored the King's speech to Congress this week. The reactions there are blunt. One reply with 209 likes spelled it out. They were glued to the TV. The viewer added that nobody is fooling anyone. Another reply, with 196 likes, asked the question the panel left dangling, as if Harry and Meghan didn't watch the King's speech. A third, with 71 likes, made the inference plainly. They both watched. Otherwise, in that viewer's reading, how would they have known when to push their own statement out? The seething, by the audience's own reading, was the actual story, not the absence. And the fourth kind, viewers who have been pushing back on the fashion framing for years. One comment, with 210 likes, surfaced what the panel kept dancing around. Tell us something about her that we don't know. That comment isn't fatigue. It is a demand. It is the audience telling a major royal channel that recycling the same surface coverage is no longer enough. They want the years before. They want the chronology. They want what credentialed biographers have already documented in print. And another comment with 140 likes said the whole framing in 7 words. She just laid back and thought of Hollywood. The audience already wrote the headline. The pundits just won't put it in print. To be fair, comments aren't court evidence. Anonymous usernames aren't credentialed sources. Like counts aren't legal standards of proof. None of that is in dispute. But when the most liked replies on the very channel that ran the headline are all asking the same question the panel refused to answer, when the question is the question the title literally promised, when the audience reading is running several years ahead of the press cycle, that is no longer just engagement noise. That is a verdict the audience has already entered into the public record. Industry insiders reportedly believe the audience itself is now functioning as the leading edge of the story. According to that reading, the press cycle is several months behind where the comment sections already are. That isn't a flattering observation for the press, but it is, increasingly, a documented one. The audience didn't need a panel to tell them what was happening. They had been tracking the chronology themselves, and they had been right about it long enough that the press, finally, is catching up to where they have been all along. We are connecting public dots, not making accusations. The chronology is on record. The audience reactions are on record. The credentialed commentary is on record. We are noting which observations have stayed consistent across years, and which observations are only now landing with the rest of the coverage. You weigh it, and here is what makes the prophecy complete. Through every year of this timeline, one thing has stayed constant. She has not addressed any of it, not in 2018, when the first round of biographer scrutiny started landing in print. Not in 2022, when Bauer's Revenge laid the entire chronology on a single shelf in Waterstones. Not last year, when the convergence in the comment sections crossed from a fringe observation into the mainstream of royal coverage. Not this week, when the audience itself started filling in the years the panel refused to. The silence isn't strategy fatigue. It isn't private dignity. It isn't legal advice. It is the absence of a counterstory, because a counterstory would have to address a chronology, and the chronology, on the public record, doesn't have a counterstory available to address it with. So what does it mean when 16 years of documented pattern produces 0 rebuttals? Not from her, not from her camp, not from any spokesperson she has ever retained. According to longtime royal watchers, the silence around the Toronto chapter alone, across nearly a decade of public scrutiny, is one of the most telling data points in the entire chronology. So let us lay it out, just the dots, in order, as they sit on the public record. Dot 1. The early Suits years in Toronto, the Soho House membership on Adelaide Street West, and the start of the documented networking pattern that biographers like Bauer have written about in print. Dot 2. 2013. The Trevor Engelson divorce, filed in the summer in Los Angeles. Finalized in 2014. Dot 3. 2014 to 2016. The Corey Vitiello relationship in Toronto. The Hospitality Scene Network. The Bridge Years. Dot 4. July 2016. The Blind Date. The Introduction. The version of the story that ran unchallenged for years, and the version Bauer questions in Revenge. Dot 5. November 2017 to May 2018. Engagement to wedding. 18 months. The compression of the timeline that mirrors the Toronto compression. Dot 6. January 2020. The Megxit announcement. 4 years from the first dinner. 20 months from the wedding. Dot 7. 2022. Bauer's Revenge publishes the documented chronology in book form. The receipts go on a single shelf for the first time. Dot 8. This week, the Met Gala invite reportedly didn't materialize. The Kyiv speech reportedly enraged the king's office during a state visit. The headlines are running. The audience reactions are running. The detitling conversation, according to several recent reports, is no longer hypothetical. 8 dots. 16 years. 1 arc. Is it possible to look at this timeline, every dot pointing the same way, and still call it coincidence? Is it possible to read these dates, these names, these documented relationships, these published biographies, these credentialed observations, and conclude that the pattern only emerged last week? The pattern has been the pattern since 2012. The only thing that changed is who is finally willing to read the dates out loud. If you saw this coming back when people rolled their eyes at you, if you watched the wedding and felt something off, if you watched Megxit and recognized the choreography, if you watched the Australia tour and saw the same script, if you watched the Kyiv speech this week and thought to yourself, this is the next dot, not a deviation. You weren't crazy. You were early. You were the first audience to read the same chronology that the courtiers, by current reporting, are now opening for themselves. The institution took 16 years. The biographers took roughly a decade. The mainstream press took the better part of 3 years. You took an afternoon. The receipts have been the same receipts the whole time. The only variable was who was willing to look at them. Now, before we wrap, I want to ask you directly. When did you first see what Bauer was seeing? Was it the Toronto coverage when it first started surfacing? Was it the wedding choreography? Was it the Australia tour? Was it the Kyiv speech this week? Drop the year and the moment in the comments below. Because I will tell you what I noticed reading through the replies under that Talk TV video this week. The audience in those comments already knows the answer. The panel just wouldn't say it. So tell me what dot landed for you. And tell me which dot in your own reading is the one that is going to land next. If this video pulled the thread the panel cut, smash that like button. It tells YouTube to push this to the next viewer who needs to see it. Subscribe if you haven't already, because we are tracking this story week by week, and the next dot is closer than most of the press cycle realizes. And share this with one person, just one, who told you years ago that something about the chronology didn't add up. They earned the receipts. Send them this. Let them know they were early. Because the next piece of this story, the one already wobbling on its own, is the detitling decision itself. We are breaking down exactly which palace voices are reportedly pushing for it, what the Sandringham Summit framework actually says about precedent, and which window the announcement, by current reporting, is most likely to land in. That breakdown is already on your screen, ready to watch next. Don't miss it. For now, 16 years of documented pattern. One direction, 0 deviations. The audience saw it first. The biographers documented it. The institution, by every available indicator, is finally catching up. And the woman who built the climb, by every dot on the public record, is running out of rooms left to climb into. Watch this space. We will see you in the next one.